Okay. Hello, Evan Duffield, lead developer of Dash.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. So, I guess my first question, and you can decline if it is not yet the time, but I saw that just today you've open sourced the documentation for Dash Evolution, and I saw that I saw the tweet right as I was in a conference actually watching you on a panel, and so I've not yet read through it. Can you tell us what it contains?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's actually the perfect time to start delving into this because what we're trying to do now is open source collaboration of actually the white papers themselves. So we released about 100 pages of white papers, and this is a pretty large concept that we're calling Dash Evolution. And the idea is that we can build a structured system kind of like PayPal, except it's entirely decentralized. And it connects to our second tier, and then the second tier then has a lot of storage capability. So we're using decentralized sharding, and then we're requiring an amount of storage per master node. And then from that we get a vast amount of storage, so maybe 40 terabytes or so. And then we can store the user's data on this distributed file system and allow for new features like friends lists and storing contacts. So for example, let's say I had a mobile device and you had a mobile device and we friend each other. And so the first thing that happens is after that relationship is made, then I send you 5 public keys and you send me 5 public keys. And so next time I want to pay you, I don't have to ask you for the key. I just click your name and click send, and it's just done. So we can add ease of use functions based off of this type of system, and that's really what we're going for.
And this, of course, would also serve to eliminate the long, ugly addresses that all of us are, of course, used to using and fine with using, but certainly they're not ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. I come from a background of technology, so I definitely understand these things, but my mom, for example, tried to use Bitcoin, and when I told her the address, it scared her, and she didn't want to send me money to this random looking string.
It looks like
thing.
an alien language.
Yeah. And so, that turns off a lot of people because it looks like cryptography, and that just scares people that don't have a deep understanding of these things or enough time to really look into it and figure out what they're doing. So by using a system that's familiar to people, an identity-based system, then we can circumvent that and build real functionality that's easy to use.
Right on. All right. And so is there anything else in Dash Evolution we should know about at the time, or would that be the main gist at this point?
One of the other really cool things is DashDrive supports something that
You're
we
calling
call...
it DashDrive?
Yeah.
Right on, okay.
Yeah. So DashDrive's this sharded, decentralized file system, and it has a few advanced features. One of these is you can do commit or rollback operations.
I don't even know what that means.
Well, okay, so I'll explain it. Imagine a transaction with 5 inputs.
Okay.
And these 5 inputs have 5 hashes attached to them. And those 5 hashes have 5 files stored on DashDrive. And so what happens is you have to reserve these 5 files to send the transaction. And so if 2 people try to compete for the same input, they'll hit the same file and try to reserve it. And commit or rollback means if you can't reserve all of the files needed for the inputs, then it rolls back. So you can't double spend because of the commit and rollback operations.
And now, did Dash require further double spend protection, or is this double spend protection needed specifically for the drive mechanism?
Well, no. So the idea here is InstantX is really neat. It allows instant transactions. And
via the quorum of masternodes.
But that was a really complicated way to implement the same type of thing. This is a much more simple way of implementing it on a decentralized file system. And it's just an example of something you can do with technology like commit or rollback on a decentralized sharded file system.
And now, will commit or rollback replace InstantX or exist alongside it?
Yeah, we're going to just replace InstantX with this new functionality.
Okay, so when do I need to update my wallet so that I'll no longer see InstantX as an option?
This is going to be a lot of work, and we're going to start working on it. We actually have some code already in the works, and we should have a prototype in 2 months, but it won't be ready for the public for at least a year and a half. It's going to be a tremendous amount of work.
And am I a member of the public, so you're telling me I don't have to worry about an update for a year and a half?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, right on. Okay. Well, I know that you will be releasing, is it the code itself that you'll be releasing at the Miami Bitcoin conference?
Well, the code's actually open source now.
Oh, okay.
And so we're showing like what we've been working on, and now we're asking for community-driven development and helping us to flesh it out and to figure out what the community actually wants from this. We have an idea of what we want to build, but what if it's something that the community doesn't want? So we want to treat them like a giant focus group and figure out something that everyone actually wants to use.
So I have a question. In terms of the decentralized governance and the masternodes voting on how the 10% of the block reward that's set aside for development is allocated, what percentage of participation approxmately are you getting in these voting rounds?
Yeah, so it's about 1/6 of the entire network for an average round, and over time it actually increases to somewhere about 1/3. And it's a delayed reaction from like just people updating and going and looking and seeing what's happening on the network.
I thought it was interesting. I guess it hadn't really sunk into me before how close Dash is in its node count to Bitcoin. Because I knew that there were about 3,400 master nodes, but then I didn't realize that there are just regular uncompensated full nodes on top of that, bringing the total to about, what did you say, like 4,300 nodes?
Yeah, it seems to be somewhere between 4,300 and about 4,600.
4,600. And Bitcoin is running, last I checked, on 5,100, just over 5,100 nodes.
Oh wow, that's actually down from the last time I looked.
It's down from the last time I looked just last week.
Yeah.
5,100 nodes.
When I did the research for my talk, it was about 5,800, so that's actually a steep decline.
Yeah, like, so, I mean, you could actually see Dash overtake Bitcoin in node count.
Yeah, and that's actually not exciting. That's actually pretty scary because that's the infrastructure that the entire ecosystem lives on. And essentially, as soon as you start to max out the bandwidth of those, then you even start exacerbating the problem because now you're charging those people more and more and more and more, and then more just keep dropping off. So, we definitely need some sort of solution quickly.
Well, let's talk about that. Like, what is an actual solution that could happen? I mean, how can, let's just put it in these terms, how can Bitcoin be saved so that what is currently the on-ramp to crypto trading is still feasible long enough so that if in fact Bitcoin's governance is not sustainable in the long term, it still lasts long enough that people can move to more sustainable alternatives?
Well, I don't see this as a death threat of Bitcoin. I really don't. The worst case scenario is that the nodes fall until they start resting on the largest companies in the ecosystem.
Okay.
And they will always run nodes. But, we call that centralization because now you have a few companies controlling all of the nodes, and those also happen to be the ones that are regulated. And so it's a point of weakness in the Bitcoin ecosystem because now it's starting to look like a lot like PayPal. They're running the infrastructure and they're making most of the money, and they're the ones being regulated. So we have to do something. If they don't want to implement something like the second tier, which has worked really well for Dash, they could do something like incentives based off of micropayments. So you could have all of the users dedicating a little bit of money, or a voluntary mining agreement where the miners send a little bit of money into an address and then that's dispersed throughout the network. I mean, there's different solutions, but I don't see them being large enough to support the type of infrastructure that Bitcoin needs. For example, our infrastructure costs about $100,000 a month right now, which is a lot of money.
You mean like in terms of inflation? Like that's how much the value is of the coins that are created.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we're giving to these people to run the infrastructure for us. And with Bitcoin, it seems to be 2 to 3 times more costly. And so we're talking $250,000 for the infrastructure for them to run.
Per month.
Yeah. And so based off of these numbers, you need to come up with a solution that's actually pretty robust and can support an infrastructure like that.
So a lot of people would say that nothing like that is going to come out of Bitcoin Core. Whether or not they're right, I don't know. So where could these types of reforms potentially come from? Some say a competing reference client. Obviously, Bitcoin XT has tried and is still trying to become the primary client. Others say something like if a side chain itself were to become popular enough, it could become the main chain. What do you see as the most feasible way that real reforms could be made if indeed enough people want them to be made?
Well, okay, so if we have a divide in the Bitcoin community and we have the XT versus the core reference client, and they actually diverge, that's a really interesting scenario. And then you could have a rapid change in one of them, because now you have a different set of developers and they're pretty much doing what they want to do. One will keep it at the same block size, one will increase it, and then we could start seeing some of these rapid changes to try to fix these things. The sidechain, I'm not exactly sure how that would work. I haven't actually heard that argument before.
I just heard it for the first time today. I had never heard it before either, but yeah, someone was like, yeah, sidechains could become the main chain if they're popular enough, and I was like, really? Like, yeah. And I have another question, which I don't know, keep talking and it's going to come back to me. I just realized that we were being watched by a few people and it made my brain go blank.
How about
you guys are doing such a good job.
Yeah.
I just keep thinking, you can cut this.
How about just like a 30-second overview of Dash that can be maybe put in front of this interview, or like your motivation for starting Dash?
Yeah. Sure, tell us about that, Evan.
So my motivation for starting Dash was that I've always been interested in economics and finance and machine learning, statistical modeling. I ran a financial firm, and I personally have a Series 65, which is a financial license to run financial firms. And so I've done that in the past. Yeah, I mean, it's just something I was interested in. I tried to go in that direction. And so by doing that, I got a lot of knowledge about economics. And I've been using that in the creation of Dash. But the thing was, when I got into Bitcoin, I wanted to tinker with the really fundamental parts of Bitcoin and not on the perimeters and like the edges of the economy where all of the tinkering is actually happening right now. And the only way to do that is with your own currency. And so I just started tinkering one weekend and launched the coin, and here we are 2 years later.
Now tell us about the coin launch, because as you know, there are trolls on the internet who say, Dash is a pre-mined scam. Why do they say that, and what happened? Because I know that you've written documentation explaining something that perhaps was an error upon the launch. I haven't read that documentation, so what did happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a pre-mine. It was an insta-mine. And so what happened was I was working with Dash as a hobby, and it was solely something I did in one weekend, and then I launched it the next weekend. And so in between that, I was working all the time. And I didn't really think it through. I didn't actually do a lot of testing. And so what I did with the first client was I based it off of Primecoin, which it has a different difficulty algorithm, which I liked, and it moves around, and I thought it was neat how it's based, like the reward is tied to the difficulty, and that was an interesting economic experiment within itself. And so I took that, and I took some ideas from Pork, which was X11, and that worked out great. And I forked Litecoin. And so I launched it, and it just blew up. And there's no other way about it. And so over about 24 hours, 2 million coins were mined. And a lot of those went to a lot of different people. I estimate about somewhere between 100 and 1,000 people were mining in that first 24 hours. And then there was a huge rise in price, and a lot of them got out, and and it dispersed those coins. And so at the beginning, like right after we discovered what happened, we asked the community, do you want to restart? And they said no. And I just went with it because, you know, the community wants that. And I mean, I don't care either way. I would have restarted and still worked on it. It doesn't really matter. And so we moved on and, you know.
So there weren't supposed to have been 2 million coins mined within the first 24 hours is what you're saying?
No, I was trying to just build this difficulty algorithm, and I should have tested it a lot more.
I see. All right. And I just remembered the question that I was going to ask you, which was, as the developer of a proof of work coin, what is your take on proof of stake? Because I hear arguments both ways. I don't know that much about proof of stake to really understand the pro or con arguments. What do you think?
Okay, so proof of stake is where you don't actually have electricity being used to mine the coin. I mean, you do, but it's a lot less. It's absolutely minimal what's actually being used. And based off of that, the hashes that are in the blocks are a lot weaker.
What do you mean by that?
So if you look at the hashes that are in the Bitcoin network, they're generated by ASICs, which they're generated by a lot of ASICs and really high quality ones. And so there's these numbers and they're essentially random. And those are the proof of work numbers. And those numbers are the security of the network. They're literally the essence of the security.
So you're saying a weaker hash means a more easily attacked network?
Well, okay, so in the case of Dash, we base a lot of the technology off of those proof of work hashes. I randomize the masternode lists with those hashes, and we organize quorums with those hashes. We do the instant transactions with those hashes. So it's just not feasible to do it with proof of stake because then it would be weak. And so I would say that for most applications, proof of stake is okay. I have some other economic arguments against it, but we could get into those at another time. And then with Dash, I mean, you just couldn't do it, so it just has to be proof of work. So I definitely prefer proof of work because it allows the second tier to exist.
Okay. All right. I would be interested, if you would be interested to go into them briefly, what are your economic arguments against proof of stake?
Just from an economic standpoint, and you know, this is just theoretical, I would say that the electricity that's used to create the money on the network has something to do with the value of the money itself. Because people, when they use equipment to mine, they're not going to want to sell for a loss. And the loss would be calculated by their cost. And when your cost is nothing, you can stand to sell for a lot less. And so that's one side of it. The other side of it is involvement. With proof of work, you have two groups of people. You have the users, and then you have the miners. And the miners are different people, and they're running different equipment. With proof of stake, you have users, and then you have the miners, which are also the users. So you have less people involved. And so less people means there's less interest, and that's also bad for currency. So I would definitely prefer it from an economic standpoint as well.
All right. Well, I think that has been a pretty thorough answering of many questions that I had. As I've told you in person, like a couple of years ago when I first started learning about Bitcoin and using it, I downloaded a core supporting wallet. I think it was Armory perhaps. And I just remember like it just slowed my computer down. And so I didn't use that for very long, and I switched to SPV shortly thereafter. And I remember thinking, okay, if I did this, a lot of other people had to have done this, and that certainly is an issue. And so that was kind of in the back of my mind, and I thought, are any of these coins going to get this figured out? And so when I read that Dash was implementing incentivized nodes, I was like, okay, there's a network that I think knows what's going on. And I admit that I was a Bitcoin maximalist at an earlier stage, right? But since then, I have come to think, okay, so this whole vision that Bitcoin brought about of like decentralized, nobody is in charge currencies, that is proving to be problematic in Bitcoin in that unless there is, massive consensus on something, like, I don't know, not everyone can be happy, not everything. And then I was like, wait a minute, like in markets are decentralized. And the reason markets are decentralized is because there are many players competing, not because there's like one firm that somehow has no one in charge. Like, of course, someone has to be in charge of all of these different competing entities until technology can prove to us otherwise. And so I appreciate Dash and other innovative coins in that I see them as providing the decentralization that people thought that Bitcoin was going to provide all on its own. I think the real decentralization will not be multiple, nodes of one crypto. No. It will be multiple nodes of various cryptos in and of themselves, like competing for market penetration. And so I just, thanks for tinkering, I guess I would say.
Well, thank you. And, I agree with what you're saying. I think that we're going to have a very broad economy, and it hurts no one to have many different options. This technology is in its infancy, and, it's only a few years old, and Bitcoin's too big to really mess with at the fundamental level now. And you can see it with the chasms in the Bitcoin community about these things in general. And so by allowing people to make altcoins and try these different things, maybe we can come up with some better strategies and service the world better and actually start the process of mass adoption.
Right on. All right, well, thank you, Evan.
Yeah, thank you for having me.